Welcome to The Signal, where we bring you curated insights every week from the most brilliant founders, investors, and thought leaders in Web3. Find out their stories, how they see today's landscape, and what they think the future holds. This podcast is powered by The Collective Solution, an invite-only experience for the most innovative minds in Web3. Your host, Tyrone. Our next guest today is iamabsinthe. Otherwise, in real life, her name is Priscilla. She is the co-founder and CMO of Nanoverse, which a lot of you may have already heard about. They came into the scene, an absolute storm. Everybody was talking about them, and we're super happy to have her here today. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. It's our pleasure, and it's Bella, our co-founder, was super excited to have a woman on the podcast. She's super excited to have you champion the women-led projects and brands in the space, and we're definitely looking forward to having more on. How about we just start with a little bit of your, almost like your origin story, right? Because I found it very interesting. It's very degen. You told me about it about a month or 2 months ago when we first met in Bali. Let's dive into that as a starting.
Yeah, definitely. So I've kind of been into crypto since 2017, and then last year New Zealand went into a lockdown for around 3.5 months. So couldn't go anywhere, couldn't even leave the house, no restaurants open. And then I started hearing all these whispers about NFTs. And I was like, what is this? I mean, I have so much time being at home and, working from home that I kind of started looking into it and started trading, started grinding, where we all start, right?
Yeah.
Discord grinding, day and night, chatting.
What was your first NFT?
My first NFT was actually a Solana NFT. I think it was called Scary Sharks, if I recall. And then obviously during that time, the whole Metaverse was getting all hyped up. There was a Forbes article, and me and my friends were like, hey, we should try to get into this raffle and see if we can get this Metaverse, because I think it's going to pop off. So none of us got the raffle, unfortunate. and then we were like, hey, we should pull in a fund together and create like an NFT fund between us friends.
And were these all people you knew before you got into NFTs, or you met online, or?
Yes, no, I've known them for almost 10 years now. So they've been really good friends of mine. Been through thick and thin together. And yeah, we decided to make a fund, and then we decided to buy Metaverse at the absolute peak top. Well, not the top, but we bought it for like 5 ETH a couple. And then at ETH was also really expensive back then.
Yeah, it was like $4,000, right?
Yeah, it was $4,000. And then it went up to 8 ETH, and we're like, no, we're gonna hold on to it because it's gonna go to 50, and absolutely got burnt by it.
Yeah.
So after that whole thing, we were like, man, NFT is such a gamble. We should stop gambling. And then we were like, hey, why don't we make our own NFT project together? And that's kind of when we started brainstorming, contacting artists and all the big works.
So for those who don't know, could you walk us through like a little bit of the Nanoverse ecosystem? Because I know you guys have like released a couple of things, right? At least.
Yeah, definitely. So Nanoverse, we started off with Project Nanopass. So the idea behind that is that you have a collection of 5,555 plots of land. They're all 3D rigged and all animated as well. So one of the first few like 3D animated NFTs in the market. And with that Nanopass, you get a weekly black box. So it's kind of like a loot box system. And inside those black boxes, you'll get NFTs, whitelists for other projects, and if you don't get anything, then you'll get fragments, which you can use in the future, or even you can use it right now to make a claim or purchase anything from our marketplace. So it's kind of like our first idea of a whitelist and NFT marketplace, and then we created an actual marketplace afterwards. So
Interesting.
with
So you had two iterations of your marketplace.
yeah. So the first one was a loot box. Although they couldn't purchase it, it was more like a luck of the draw kind of thing. But then we decided, hey, if people are collecting fragments, let's utilize those fragments and create a whitelist marketplace for that. So that's kind of how that started. And then now we're working on our phase two of our project. So phase two are 3D AI desktop assistants. So you'll get your own agent that you'll be able to, talk with, communicate with, because it's all AI powered. And it will be on your desktop and eventually on your mobile as well, available. So you can bring it
That's super
anywhere.
cool.
Yeah. And then you'll be able to, ask it, what the weather's like today, or ask it to, book calendars, like calendar meetings for you. Just kind of like a day-to-day use kind of thing. And all of the AIs will be, they'll all be catered to you individually. So they'll have their own personalities based on the data that it collects off you. So no AI intelligence is the same. And then you'll be able to use your fragments and bits tokens to upgrade the intelligence of the AI. So
That's
it will
super
be
interesting.
able to do more actions, like eventually once you use all of the bits tokens and frags tokens.
Huh. There's two questions here I immediately kind of want to look into, right? Like when we talk about AI, from what I understand, AI can be quite expensive. Is that something like you're using a partner for, or are you guys building yourself, or how do you guys look at that?
So with that, from my basic understanding, we have three AI people on board. So
Oh
they've
wow, okay.
yeah, so they've previously worked for really big companies, and unfortunately, I can't disclose that. But they have worked for like an automobile company and a large search engine company as well.
Super cool.
So yeah, so kind of I think we use an existing database system for the AI, and then we build on top of it using if this and that formula
Right.
for the intelligence of it. So yeah, it's not as expensive or as complicated as a lot of people think. I think if you break it down into the small pieces, it's a very like achievable thing to do.
Uh-huh.
And I think the methods that they're using makes it so that it's a lot more personable to the individual that's using the AI as well.
Super cool. Okay,
Yeah,
one more question, and then we will over this conversation kind of like dive deeper into it and like the team and,
yeah,
and how you look at the space and everything. But I'm going to circle back around as well to kind of like your own origin story, right? Even pre-crypto. And,
yeah.
and but so I had like a thought when you spoke about AI and then learning. I can almost see like, let's say this particular AI was used by some really smart person, or yesterday we had Zeneca on the podcast, and
Yeah.
so let's say Zeneca owns one of these AI, and it's been his AI for 3 years now. I would that, I guess there's almost like some level of speculative value on that. It's like, oh wow, this AI was with Zeneca for 3 years. It's more valuable because it's learned from him,
Hmm.
and I want to buy it from him, as opposed to
Hmm.
like a random AI from from someone who nobody knows of.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be the case? Is that something that
I mean, that depends on the individual that's selling the NFT as well, right? Because you can sell the avatar on its own without the data set that comes with it. So you have the
right?
option to
Okay,
sell that data set. Yeah, because
interesting.
yeah, because you might want, like, the new purchaser might want their own personality to it, right?
Mm,
So they'll come with a complete blank slate, but the avatar will be the one that you've purchased in the format of an NFT.
super cool. Interesting. Okay, cool. Let's loop back around. You mentioned, 2017 is when you got into crypto. Was that like as an investor? Because I know I've seen some of your tweets before, and it's clear you like a little bit of leverage trading as well. Uh,
Yes, leverage trading is definitely new. I never really used to like gambling that way, but I was like, you know what? NFT markets are down. There's not much I can do.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, in 2017, I just invested into Ethereum and Bitcoin. Not a huge chunk. So when it did pump, it was barely anything. But yeah, during that time, I was working as an analyst in a real estate investment management firm in New Zealand. And I've been working as an analyst up until last year. So around what, 4 years now? Almost 5 years, actually. So yeah, it was a big change going from an analyst in real estate to NFTs, crypto.
and marketing. Yeah,
Yeah, and marketing as well. I mean, I guess the similarities between NFTs and real estate is that, NFTs are tangible assets. You can see them, you can view them, you can like what they look like instead of like investing in just crypto where you just invest in a
sure.
coin. And it's the same with real estate, right? I really like the aspect that it's a physical, tangible asset. You can look at the quality, you can look at the design, and you have sort of an attachment to it, which you do with NFTs as
Mm,
well.
mm.
So that's kind of why I decided, hey, I think NFTs would be a good shot for me. And yeah, and I mean, in terms of marketing, we thought that if I took on the marketing position, it would be the best because back in the days, like last year, a lot of teams were not doxed, right?
Sure.
It was majority anonymous groups creating NFT projects. So I kind of thought of the idea of, hey, okay, the team wants to remain undoxed for a bit because they have businesses in New Zealand,
Sure.
and they don't want to be exposed to,
Sure.
whatever happens. So I was like, hey, I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to risk. I'm all in on this. How about I dox myself? And then we could do things like host Twitch streams, play games with our viewers, and really build a relationship with the people in the community that way. Because if you put a face to the project, then
Absolutely.
you know, people can relate and they want to be a part of that community.
That's a super interesting topic to me, right? So, the first thing that comes up was in maybe the first 6 months of the collective. We've been around about 14 months now. In the first 6 months
Mm-hmm.
of the collective, I was very adamant that we're only going to work with docs teams.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually turned out to be a little bit of like shooting myself in the foot because I ended up getting in touch with the Mad Meerkats team. One of the members of the collective was like, "Hey, you should talk to these guys. What they're doing is really really cool. They're based out of Singapore, And we get into some group DMs, and I'm like, are you guys willing to jump on a call or be docs? And they're like, no. And I just like put a pin in it that right there. I didn't even want to look any further. I was like, oh, it's just
Yeah.
the animal PFP, blah blah blah. They ended up going on to be the biggest ecosystem on Chronos.
Yeah.
One of the biggest if not the biggest NFT collection on Chronos, with a bunch of DeFi things and liquidity pools and whatever.
Mm.
Um, and then 6 months later, during NFT Bali, they actually came back around and we did collaborate. And it turns out like that whole time we could have been doing things. And of course, I faded that trade. I didn't buy any NFTs, and they ended up getting to like a 7-8 ETH floor on their ETH collection, and I was like, interesting. And what you said was really interesting, right? It's like for I've definitely changed my opinion on like being doxed or undoxed now in the space, because as you said, for some people they own businesses off chain, and
Mm.
like the top example is probably anybody who works in a gaming company, right?
Mm.
A lot of the gaming consumers just absolutely still hate NFTs,
Mm.
and so it can have a negative effect on their real life businesses, quote unquote real life, that it's a great reason to remain undoxed. Is the team still undoxed in large part?
No, no, all of the team is docs now. We've had a few, gatherings with our community already. So one in Bali, just a very small, intimate dinner with the people, with our holders that were coming to Bali. And then, excuse me, and then we had a bigger one in New York for NFT NYC.
Super cool.
Yeah, and actually, no, we've had three. So our first gathering was in Singapore. So that turned out to be a very last minute thing because I was heading over to Singapore to see some friends, and I was like, hey, why don't I make an event out of this? And then kind of got a little venue in Singapore, displayed our NFTs, got our
Yeah.
holders to come in, and I was expecting like around, 40 to 60 attendees, and then I saw like over 120 people come, and I was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, there's so many holders in Singapore. This is insane. And we all had such a great time just getting to know each other and talking and yeah, it really builds like, I've met so many great people and they've become really like good friends of mine in the Web3 space. And yeah, it really just makes you build like deeper connections. And after I saw them in Singapore, I saw them in New York. Like it's an amazing space, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like some of the people I've met in Web3 are now lifelong friends after a year, and it's almost like we've known each other forever. It's strange.
Yeah.
There's something about, investing in things, losing money together, learning a whole new industry together. In fact,
Mm.
building an industry, right? Because there's no real, system or structure that's been here for 10 years. It's brand new, right? Which
Yeah.
is super exciting. Speaking of that, how do you see the NFT space currently? Like how has it changed? Where are we at right now in your perspective? And then maybe how do you see the next 1, 3, 5 years developing? And this is of course completely speculative and not financial advice for anybody, but um, yeah, what do you see the market as today?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think today, well, clearly we're in a bear market right now. I think we're still super early in the market in the NFT space. Um, it's a lot of experimentation on what works and what doesn't work.
Mm,
I know for sure that, marketing NFTs, when I started first marketing Nanopass and Nanoverse AHQ, it was, I created a 4-page plan on how our marketing strategy is going to be in the next like 8 weeks. And none of it like fell through, like none of it landed the way I thought it would land. And then that's when I learned, hey, traditional marketing in a sense doesn't align with NFT marketing. And it's all super experimental, it's very different, and you just got to figure out what works with your community, right? So yeah, it's definitely an experimental phase in the NFT market. I mean, we've gone through so many different metas and so many different, eras in the NFTs. And most recently we had the free mint meta, which is I think is currently dying off right now. It's not really picking back up anymore. And yeah, we're just waiting for what the next meta is going to be in this industry. And then I guess like this is the best time for projects to be focusing on their own project and continuing to build what they've currently built on right now because a lot of people have left the space because you're not making the quick money that you used to make anymore
sure.
last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we'll start seeing which projects continue um, working on their project and which ones will eventually kind of rise up once the bull market starts running again. It's kind of like, the internet era where all of these companies just die down and then you see the rise of Google, Amazon and Netflix and whatnot. So yeah, it will be really interesting to see what happens in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely already noticing a bunch of people and projects kind of dying, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at like the time frame of like projects that minted right around the cool cats or just after in the following month or two. So a lot of them
Mm-hmm.
have burnt through all their cash already super
Mm-hmm.
fast somehow. I don't know, I don't know where all that money went or how they did that, but um how do you guys look at that? Because I was speaking with Shan from Project Gajira as well, and they're super, 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 super conservative. They've got like a 5 year long vesting schedule for team NFTs, and I haven't met someone a team that's got such a modest salary so far. They're paying
Hmm.
themselves like 1 ETH a month across the team for everybody, which is, I think, absolutely fantastic. But how does the Nano team look at that and balancing kind of long term with short term and allocating funds? I know that's not
Yeah.
typically your role, but I'm curious to hear your insight.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, with our project, we have a specific budget that we try to stick to throughout the next 6 years, 1 year, 2 year, and then 5 year budget. So currently, we're still on track with our budget. We are a little bit delayed in terms of our release for phase two, but that's because, it's a bear market. It's not a good time for anyone to really release a project at the
Sure,
moment.
sure,
So we spent a lot of that time, refining our models, refining the rigging, making sure there's no clipping or anything. But yeah, we have a budget that we stick to. And if the day comes that we do run out of money, which we're quite far from anyway, since we've been very like the prices that we've been getting for our artists, for our developers, they're really good prices. But if the day comes where we're like, oh no, we're running low on funds, we did make a contract between all of us that we would reinvest the money that we have from the project back into the project. So that's
interesting.
kind of how we've, laid it out to keep the money going for the project and to keep the project continuing.
That's super cool. I like that. I really like that. You guys have even kind of agreed that you're going to reinvest your personal salaries. That's conviction. I've no, if I've ever heard it. Hey,
Yeah.
let's kind of talk about two things here. I really want to kind of dig into because we've moved from the era of competition to the era of collaboration, and some people are
Hmm.
doing that better than others. And it strikes me, you guys strike me as someone who's very willing to come to the table to work with other brands and find synergies and alignment in meaningful ways.
Hmm.
um just even when I introduce you to Ecta, you're like, immediately, let's do a space, let's book another call, let's and they're also super happy to get on um follow that train of thought. And
Yeah.
so, with that in mind, something that I've been very mindfully aware of this whole time is that the real most valuable asset for any brand in Web3 or any business model or anything really is the people, right? It's people first, always.
Yeah.
And so, if we couple that with people first, always, and rapidly decentralizing infrastructure and tools, how do you guys go about like empowering? Is there something in place? Do you guys utilize something like an ambassador program or some kind of a system or culture where you're able to identify people who might build things within the ecosystem? Is that something
Yeah.
you guys are doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you guys are part of the Nanoverse community, you guys know that we have various different, parts of our project that kind
Yeah.
of act as ambassadors for us. The first one being the Phantoms. So we have a group of Phantoms that act as Nanoverse ambassadors, and they reach out to different projects. If they're also working on another project as part of their team, then they link us up together. And if it comes through them, uh, we know that that's been vouched by them. Like they wouldn't give us a project to collaborate with that hasn't been vouched or they haven't researched on. So yeah, so our phantoms kind of act as our ambassadors for us. Then we have our Y mods, which is like Yuri's team that reach out to different projects. And then, it first starts off as like a collaboration to bring their project exposure. And then if we find that there are some synergies in what they're doing and what we're doing, then we look to expand on that as well. Um, yeah, I mean, we have different avenues for that. And I think collaboration is such a big thing in this space. And it's something that everyone kind of needs to get on board instead of competing against each other with, different projects, because every project has its own strengths and weaknesses, right? One project may be knowledgeable in one area and lacking in a certain area, and then another project could be the complete opposite. So if we gather our resources and the people that are with us, then we could start creating and innovating things that people haven't done before, and you do it together with them.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
That's really shoring up on your strengths. Is that, I think in the executive coaching world before I came into Web3, which is what I kind of did for 6 years before this, was I often told people it's not about trying to hedge your weaknesses or learn to improve those areas as much as it is to lean into your natural strengths and find people around you that can, really, really rise together with, And so
Yeah.
I love the approach. I love the phantoms. What was the other one? Phantoms and what?
And our wine mods. So they kind of approach other
Yes.
projects for our marketplace and black boxes, and that's kind of how we start giving out things to our
Yeah.
community.
I can really see, like, just that you guys have put in a lot of love and effort into, like, even just the names and the lore. And is there some kind of story as well in the background being developed? Have you got like a story person that's building out a whole universe? Is that I don't know. That's like the next leap in my mind that I'm kind of curious about.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I mean, from the beginning, if you scroll through the Nanoverse HQ, timeline and go back all the way from to October when we first launched it, you'll see our project is very lore based. There's a story behind every character,
Yeah.
where their origin is, and we've even created like animations for it as well. To kind of show you where Ray comes from, where Yuri comes from, where Rui comes from, what type of relationship they have. Yeah, it's very much law based, and I think that kind of segues into the fact that we're trying to eventually build out our IP,
Yeah.
and then create manga, animations, and whatnot in the future.
So with that in mind, I've got a conversation booked with Cameron Mullen as well from Non-Fungible Films. I don't know if you guys are already connected. I could totally see nano characters being turned into an anime series and everything. Are you guys connected with the Non-Fungible Films team?
No, I don't. I don't believe so. I haven't talked to them personally. So
Okay, cool. Well, that's definitely something I think I would be more than happy to set up. He's doing things
awesome.
with the apes and the gutter gang and stuff. So let's see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's a natural next step if it's super story focused. I'm sure this topic's come up, and I don't know if you guys are already talking about it, but gaming. How do you guys look at that, and what do you? And let's take that macro, and then go a little bit more micro. How do you see the GameFi space in general at the moment?
Yeah.
And then
I,
and then how does the Nano team kind of look to navigate that, if at all?
yeah, definitely. I think the GameFi space at the moment, it's not too big. I think right now, if you were to release a game in the NFT space, people will probably pay it for like what, 2 to 4 months, 3 to 6 months, and then it will start weaning off. It hasn't really picked up since probably like Axie Infinity or something. But I think in the future, once there's more technology in the space and there's more innovation in this space, the GameFi space will definitely start to blow up and be a huge component into our day-to-day lives. With Nano, currently, I mean, we're working on smaller games, like using our fragments to do things like a gamble called Frags Arcade. That's all we're kind of experimenting on at the moment. But eventually, once we have more confidence to build a game, because it takes a lot of capital, a lot of money,
Yeah.
then that's when we'll explore the realms. If we find the right people to partner with in this, then we can be confident that this is a risk that we're worth taking. But at the moment, it's not our main focus. Our main focus is to, continue building out phase 2 and then eventually phase 3, which is our whole metaverse ecosystem called the Nanoverse, and then create a lot more utility for that. And yeah,
I
just
love
one
that.
thing at a time.
Yeah, for sure. You guys are super focused. Um, I like the small games. It kind of just gives like a precursor to what might come.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about this within the collective. Is like, how do you balance telling people what they get with their NFT versus adding a little bit, leaving a little bit of that mystery? Because you've probably noticed this, a lot of collections that have done really, really well to explain their value proposition have subsequently gone on to do terribly in the market. There is still a lot of that degen sort of gambling kind of speculative hype that people want.
Yeah.
So managing those that balance, but also keeping yourself flexible enough that if the entire industry changes in the next 3 to 6 months, you're able to adapt and keep moving, right? But if you're still working
Yeah.
on a year-long plan that you've promised a while ago, you end up a little bit like, caught between a rock and a hard place. Super cool.
Yeah.
I like that. So phase 3 is the Nanoverse. Hey, I want to take this a little bit more um, about you again.
Mm-hmm.
I find it super interesting to see what makes people tick, and I think quite often that what shapes us and who we are is our early lives and our family dynamic. And could you
Yes.
could you could you speak to a little bit like what's your background? Where'd you grow up? Do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. So my background is I'm Indonesian, but my family moved there since I was 1 year old. So I'm 26 at the moment. So I've been there pretty much my whole life, right? And I have three older brothers, which is why I have a very terrible addiction and avid love for gaming.
I love it.
So yeah, so that's kind of where my whole background started. Like, I think one of the first few games I played was old school RuneScape, if you know what that is.
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
loved
played
it.
that when I was like 9, and I'd be like to my brother, "Hey, can I use your credit card to buy a membership for RuneScape?" And he'd be like, "Okay, yeah." So yeah, it started off with RuneScape, and then they started playing Counter Strike as well. And then I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe like Counter Strike will be really good for me too."
Oh my God, we were the same era of gaming. This is
Yeah,
Counter Strike.
yeah. And obviously like the bigger games like Maple Story, and then I think my most recent game that I've kind of played, and probably the last game I kind of played was League of Legends and Valorant. So kind of did
Super cool.
streaming for that as well.
You do it now,
During
or you did, or
No, I did. And then that was during the first lockdown when coronavirus first came out. So I lost my job because I was in between switching jobs. And then I was like, okay, no one's going to hire me in this type of market right now because they've all got a hiring freeze. So let's start streaming Valorant since I love playing that game.
I love it.
So yeah.
Did you have, did
So
you were you able to monetize that at all?
yeah. I mean, I earned a pretty steady income from it. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be picked up by an agency and sponsored by MSI within a month of streaming.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a good experience. And it was great. It was a great feeling to know that one of my passions, which is gaming, I was able to make a living out of it.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so that was great. The only downside is that it was kind of like, an unstable form of income, and I've always kind of lived on stability with my
Sure.
jobs. So I think
Especially
once
as an analyst. in the
Yeah,
real
as an
estate side.
analyst, I was like, no, these numbers aren't making sense to me. I can't, I don't know if I'm gonna live off this.
Yeah.
And then after 6 months of just streaming, I was like, hey, I think like, you know, COVID, no one really cares about it anymore. And I think the market's starting to pick up. So I reached out to my agency and I was like, hey, are there any jobs in the industry again for me? So that's why I stopped streaming because I got my real life job back.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I feel like we could go in many different directions. You know, I too I played RuneScape, Counter-Strike. A large part of my upbringing was in Singapore. And if we compare Singapore and Australia, like what do rebellious teenagers do on the weekend or when they skip school? In Australia, it's like they party, they drink, and they have
Yeah.
they get together in around music and dancing and house parties and whatever. In Singapore, it was we'd go
Net
play
cafe.
LAN games, and internet cafe, right? And there'd be like 20 of us, and we'd stay there for 24 hours, 48 hours, sometimes even 72 hours. It was kind of crazy sleeping at the table. I'm sure you
Yeah.
could. Um,
No.
I didn't play much League. I was more of a Dota person because I was
Yeah.
huge on the Warcraft 3, and I played some of the earliest iterations on those custom maps. And so
Yeah.
it's super interesting to see how that's evolved. And I think this is a great segue because, if we look at the gaming space today, and people ask me, from the gaming industry to point at anything or show them anything that gamers will actually play, and I immediately tell them I can't. It's not there yet, right?
Mm.
It's just not there yet. We need to give it a little bit more time. But
Mm.
but in the same way that the earliest games like RuneScape, if we compare that to World of Warcraft, for example, completely different scale, right? But
Mm.
at the same time, RuneScape has gone on to continue improving, and they've got different iterations, and people have the nostalgia to go back and play it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting. There are now some great Web3 companies who are building um, with a key focus on actually making games fun. Because as a gamer myself, and for you, I imagine you look at Axie once and you're like,
Mm.
I'm not spending my time doing
No.
this. Right? Like, there's no way. And so, how in your mind, how far away are we? For like in terms of a timeline, do you think? Because I know some games, just even in Web 2, take years to develop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if Web3 companies are saying that they're developing a game, then I think it will be, I don't know, 3 to 5 years till they get released in a full functioning, environment and gameplay. Um, Even like different games alone, like Web2 games, they take years and millions of dollars to be developed. And that's with, the right expertise in the industry as well. Whereas with Web3 games, I think, people who are kind of claiming that they're building a game, it's very hard to find industry specific people who are well experienced in this. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think we're still quite a while away, and I think we haven't really figured out what type of games people do like. Um, yeah, there's just so many genres, and you can go, so many different ways about this.
yeah, and I think there's going to be a really interesting um challenge to solve. Is like, how do you do tokenomics, and do people
Mm-hmm.
actually have to buy assets to be able to play? I
Mm-hmm.
think people by and large want to be able to access a game for relatively cheap, whether it's $50 to $100. And um you know if they have to buy real estate and they have to buy this and that just to get access, I think that's going to not be able to attract the million active monthly users that you kind of need.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, the crypto space is still relatively very small. And for a game to be successful, they have to have a large user base, right? And if you're wanting to create a Web3 game, then you have to figure out a way to, make Web3 as frictionless as possible, for them to access their game. Because if someone who's not in the crypto space but is a gamer wants to play this game that is on the blockchain, and they don't know how to, create an account, create a wallet or whatnot, or purchase the assets in them, then you're not going to get that mass market that you want to get, right? Um, so yeah, I think firstly, we need to figure out a way to make things as frictionless as possible. And then secondly, we need to find out, what grabs the interest of people in this space, within our age to want to play that game and motivate them to stay on playing that game for the next coming years.
Super cool. Super cool. We're gonna jump around here a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
my curiosity is peaked in many different avenues. I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into your family, but I also want to go into how you guys look at events and if
Mm.
there are if there's anything already locked in there, or if you're kind of just like again experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but first, let's touch on what's the new meta. That sort of came up, and we were talking about free mints and how that's kind of dying off. I think what really strikes me as you guys are really well positioned is that it seems that it's actually story focused brands, right? It seems like there's two things happening right now. There's story focused brand building, and then there's also application processes for people who want to buy an NFT, right? So it's if you want to get on a whitelist, you got to jump in, you got to have a call with a member of the team. And I think this is really, really powerful in in multiple ways, but I'll riff on it a little bit and open it up to you. I think a huge challenge for me to wrap my head around for a long time was how do you serve a community? Because a business, let's be real, a business, and these are just businesses, they're startups. A
Mm.
business needs to be really good at solving a pain point for a target niche audience, right? And then they become known for that. Now, the challenge is, besides a collective interest in NFTs and whether they're long-term investors or flippers or whatever, we don't necessarily know who are in these communities, whether they're the apes or the cool cats and over time they start to form a little bit of an identity. But
Mm.
for mints that were largely available or open to anybody, you don't know, the age demographic. You don't know where they are in the world. So if you start running events, it's like you might have 5 people in
Mm.
that country, but you might have 1,000 people in the US or whatever.
Mm.
So I think the application process allows you to curate the people. It allows you to understand what they want,
Yeah.
and it allows you to serve them better. How do you see that? Have you guys seen this as well, or what are your thoughts on application processes and curation?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't personally really seen it just yet, so I don't think I have a really great comment to give on it. But I guess understanding your community, understanding your customers and consumers is probably one of the most powerful tools that you can have. And you already have a very basic, tool to use that, which is, your Discord analytics and then your Twitter analytics. But getting like those are very limited because usually they only give like 1 to 2 months of data for you to use. And if there is an application process that can look at a timeline and be able to even forecast what your community would look like in the future, I think that would be like, an amazing application to have. And a lot of projects would want to jump on that as soon as possible. Because, with NFT Web3 projects, it's all about the community, right? And it's all about, what can you provide to your community? And especially if you're holding, you know, real life events, you need to know what type of demographic you have and where they're all based, and whether or not it's the amount of money that you're going to be spending out of either your development fund or your community fund is worth holding that event.
Super cool. And I guess that's a perfect segue. Like, you did Singapore, Bali, New York, and we'll touch on the fact that the team has moved now to Bali, which I'm a total advocate for. As you know, I'm a firm believer that Bali is going to be a huge hub for Web3 and NFTs, and there's many little micro cities being built. What what made that decision happen for the team? Are there plans to get like really, really immersed in the local expat or local thriving Web3 community?
Yeah, I guess when we're kind of in New Zealand and we're thinking, hey, if this project goes well, where should we move? Me being Indonesian, I was like, hey, let's move to Bali. It's an amazing place and it's not too far from New Zealand. Um, and yeah, and I think it's a great place for expats instead of, somewhere, for example, like Jakarta. Sorry, my
That's all right.
neighbor is knocking.
Is that your
So
neighbor?
noisy. Yes, it's my neighbor.
It's a hammering. Yeah,
Yeah, he's just
this
hammering away.
when you're recording at home, there's always an interesting, like we get dogs barking on episodes and all kinds of construction noises too. It's totally
Yeah, I'm
fine.
so sorry. It's even worse when they do it at 5 a.m. in the morning. You don't know how angry I get.
I have a feeling that would be a great video. Uh, okay, cool. So events, Bali, moving to Bali. How
Yeah.
often do you guys kind of look? Are you guys kind of looking at hosting events? Is that something that's kind of concrete that there's a plan for, or
It's not really concrete. I think we're now more focused on events that bring knowledge to our community. So we're wanting to and like host events or even sponsor events that do things like hackathons, webinars, bringing people overseas that can bring knowledge to our community. That's kind of what we're focusing on right now. I think previously in New York, we were all about like, hey, let's have fun with our community. Like a lot of them are in New York at the moment. Let's throw a huge, massive party. But, did that. And now we're wanting to provide more useful events that bring knowledge, that focuses on, well-being
sure?
and your mental health, because I think that's something that's quite often overlooked is how your mental health is affected in the Web3 space. Because you know Twitter, Discord, everyone is hiding behind a keyboard, hiding behind an anonymous activity, and you don't know what a person could be going through.
Well said. Well said. That was one of the topics I've got listed here that I wanted to touch on and kind of like get your insight to as well, being someone who's been in the space as well for a pretty significant amount of time. And
Mm-hmm.
there is also, I think, some space here to talk about being a woman in the space, right? And so, but we'll touch on that in a little bit here. It sounds to me like the Nanoverse should definitely be a part of NFT Bali next year, and we should continue that conversation after this. We'd love to have you jump
Yes,
on board. We just got a strong
definitely.
maybe from Zeneca yesterday, and the Kingpin Dow from Gutter Cat Gang, and so it's looking like it's going to be 4 or 5, maybe even 10 times bigger than it was last year. So that I'm very, very excited. Would love to have you
Awesome.
guys on board. Um, I like the part of, if someone were to build a tool for Discord, and maybe it's already out there and we just don't know, but I'm actually actively looking for it, is like how to do Discord analytics in a meaningful way that's much more data than just a month. How can we see
Mm,
a growth forecast, projections? How can we see when was the last time someone was properly engaged?
mhm.
When are they dropping off, and why? Anybody listening to this episode, reach out to either of us. There will be links to our socials in the show notes, if you have something like that, and we'll take a look. Um, let's jump in to your family again. Are your three brothers or parents involved in the space as well? Or what industries are they a part of?
No, so my parents are both retired already, and my
What they
three
used to do?
brothers. What did they used to do? So my dad used to own a business in Indonesia, so he worked over from Indonesia in Jakarta. And my mom has kind of always been a housewife, which is kind of the Asian culture of the women
Yeah,
taking care of the household and then the men bringing home the bread.
sure, sure.
And my brothers, no, they've never really been in this industry. They've never really been, crypto investors or anything like that till I kind of told them to invest in crypto. Um, so yeah, I think growing up, our family has been very risk averse, if I may say. I remember when I was really young, my parents used to always tell me to don't invest in stocks. That's how people lose money, and blah blah blah. So, so that's kind of the stigma that I've always grown up with
Wow.
until I finished university and I was like, hey, actually, like I work in a listed funds management, like our company was in the stock markets. I think if you know what you're investing in, you're not taking a huge risk. Especially since I was in real estate, I was like, hey, real estate is probably the least riskiest, albeit like lowest returns out of all of the stocks that you can
Sure.
buy. But yeah, it's kind of what started piquing my interest. And I was like, I'm still young. I can afford to lose capital. Like if I end up going broke, like it's fine because I don't have a family that depends on me. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have anything. So, high risk, high reward investments only. And
I love
that's
it.
where
I love it.
crypto comes in.
Yeah. That's super cool. I'm super
Yeah.
proud to have another fellow Indonesian on the podcast and to be doing so
Yeah.
well. We were at an event the other, maybe about 6 weeks ago now, for favors in Ubud at Park, and there was this absolute phenomenal superstar of a woman. She runs something like 25 different incubators across Indonesia, um, and she was originally from Jakarta. I'm curious, where are you from in Indonesia? I'm
From
from
Jakarta.
Medan. You're from Jakarta as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I'm from
and
Jakarta.
um, and is that like your family's always been from Jakarta, or
Yes, from my mum's side, my grandparents are originally from China, so they immigrated into Indonesia when they were super young. And from my dad's side, always been Jakarta, South Jakarta kid. I don't know if you know the term Jaxel.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where my parents are from, and yeah, and then we moved to New Zealand.
Super cool. And of course, I imagine you could speak fluent Indonesian as well, or a little bit less. You
Ah,
moved so young.
I mean, like, I can speak Indonesian fluently, but my vocabulary is very limited because
Conversational.
I only ever used it to talk to my parents because they forced me to speak Indonesian at home so I wouldn't forget my own mother language. So when I speak to actual people from Jakarta, they use this like young people lingo that my parents have never used on me. So I'm like, oh, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? Huh?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I can relate.
that's
I've started interacting with Indonesian founders, and there's an event this weekend for Utopia. You guys should come. They're doing an after party for CoinFest. And initially in our first conversation, I'm like, oh, by the way, we can speak Indonesian. And we started speaking, and then there was a few words here and there. I was like, wait, hang on, what's that?
yeah,
And but it went well. And then afterwards they started messaging me in Indonesian, and I was like, I had to send them a voice note. I was like, I speak, but I can't really read
yeah,
in Indonesian. So, and they're like, oh, okay, sorry. And they started texting me in English again, which was a lot of fun. But awesome. Let's jump in because I know we're starting to get a little bit low on time. I think we got another sort of 20 minutes with you. Is that right?
yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
Great. Let's jump into mental health and life work balance because I'm very passionate about this, and I think there is a huge
Mm-hmm.
need for this. There's typically 7 different lines of development in a person's life, and based on their environment, their upbringing, they're exposed to a different ability to grow in those areas, whether it's spiritual, intellectual, communicational, relational, career, finances, and otherwise. I think the crypto space in general attracts a lot of intellectually, financially developed people because it's so complex, and they got to really dive in and learn a lot of things to get here.
Mm-hmm.
um, but it seems like as a direct result of these 12, 16, or almost very addictive environments to be in, with ridiculous price action and all kinds of things going on, people are getting very burnt out. The same people who were here last year they still love it, but they're just, you know, needing to take time away. They're needing to
Mm.
stop. How do you look at life work balance? And I like to call it life work balance, because it shouldn't be work life balance, life work balance. Um, how do you look at that? Do you have any habits in place, system structures, rules for yourself? Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I was being completely honest, my mental health is not as well, how would I say it? I would just like to say that my team is better at handling confrontation and any noise and chatter that kind of comes from outside, right?
Sure.
So I think things like Twitter and like Discord, they affect me a lot more than my team, and how I handle it is sometimes I like to kind of disconnect from it. But I know that as a founder, it's not something that you can really do. You can't just disappear just because your mental health is not feeling that great. And I think that's has been a very difficult journey for me. But I am so thankful that I have such a great team, such a great leader. Whenever I'm feeling, whenever I don't feel great with my mental health because of the things that I see on Twitter or whatever, lately Twitter has been all drama, drama, drama. Um, Ray, aka Julian, the project lead for Nanoverse HQ, he always talks to me, reassures me, and comforts me. So that's kind of how I deal with it, is by having a great support system, aka my team, making sure that I'm feeling okay and just giving me that reassurance, right? But if you're just a general investor, um, for your own mental health, if you shouldn't sacrifice your mental health or your health in general, like well-being, for this space. If you're feeling like it's overwhelming, take time off. Um, I know that if you take 3 days off in the NFT space, month or a whole week, but that is like your mental health is something that can't be replaced, right? It's something that is so much more valuable than the NFT drops that are happening in the next 3 to 7 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just something that I really wish that people, take care of. Um, because, if you just let it consume you, you can go into like really dark places. And, if you're ever feeling that way, make sure you reach out to other people. There's so many great people in this space that you can talk to. Um, and no one is here to judge, right? Like we're all in the same boat. We've all probably experienced the same things that everyone else has been experiencing, and we've all made it through one way or another. And we can always share that knowledge and advice on how to, have a better mental health and how to help each other out.
I like that. The support system is super, super important. Like one of my mentors who's been in the personal and business coaching world for the past 20 years taught me about the values pendulum. There's sort of 7 stages, but again,
Mm-hmm.
the 7 seems to be the number that pops up a lot in this industry. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to quickly riff on the first 3, because I think it's really important, and might be valuable to both you and maybe even the listeners, right? And so the first 3 are survival, connection, and empowerment. And knowing which one you're in is really, really powerful, because survival is, if we were to describe what it feels like you're completely alone. Nobody understands you. The world is crumbling. You're just trying to get through and survive the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then connection is where you kind of, exactly as the name states, connection is where you get connected with someone else. You're able to relate with them. You don't feel so alone. You're able to talk about it and share stories, and feel a little bit more connected. I mean, there's good and bad connection, and we can go into that a little bit more, but kind of like the concept, birds of a feather flock together. um, if two depressed people get together and they connect on how depressing life is, they'll feel
Mm-hmm.
momentarily better, but there's no way to get into number three, which is empowerment. And
Mm.
empowerment, what empowerment really looks like is you wake up, you're feeling great, you're feeling fresh, you have a very clear vision of the future, you feel part of something larger than yourself, you know what role you play, and the direction seems pretty clear, right? And so people typically swing, and that's why it's called a pendulum. You swing back and forth between these three if you've got something good going on in your life. But a lot of people, a majority of people, typically only spend time in the first two. They just swing back and forth between survival and connection because they don't know how to get to three.
Mm.
Um, and then what's interesting is that you can find a way to keep yourself in three for longer, or empowerment for longer, which is by implementing systems and structures, which is kind of number four. And so, recognizing what are the things that make you feel good. And you'll see where I'm going with this, because prior to Web3 and prior to leverage trading and spending all my time in this highly addictive environment, I had a really strong mindfulness practice that I would do 3 times a day. I was practicing some kind of movement, whether it's yoga or gymnastics or the gym, at least twice a day. Not for long periods of time. Sometimes it's 5, 10 minutes, sometimes it's 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. But it really made me a lot more balanced, a lot more motivated, a lot more disciplined to get things done. It all fell away for the first year in Web3, disappeared. My health suffered. I was eating terrible things. All the things that I'd cut out of my life came creeping back
Mm-hmm.
in. I don't know if you can relate, or if
Mm-hmm.
anybody listening can relate, but it's interesting once you do get back onto that habit stack, how quickly you get back to feeling really, really good. Um, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing about that.
Yeah.
I think the part I wanted to touch on next as well is again, you mentioned Twitter confrontation, even, I mean, you didn't use these words, but social media abuse, because it's what it is, right? Some people
Mm.
can be quite nasty out there. Especially, this question comes in two parts, especially on founders.
Mm.
We've been having a lot of conversations internally in the collective in our founders forum recently about the unrealistic expectation on founders, right? If we look at the startup world, 90%, even 95% of startups are going to fail.
Mm.
But somehow in this space, the consumer or the investor expects 100% success rate, and they want number to go up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And realistically, I know a ton of founders who have families to feed. They're trying their best. They've got all this immense pressure on them, but they need to find another job, right? They need to find a way to support themselves. How do you look at, because you're both a founder and an investor in other projects, how do you look at that world, and how can we as a community in general, in your eyes, improve? And so that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, how does that relate to social media and perhaps even being a woman?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very big question to ask. I think one of the main reasons why people are the way they're acting in the Web3 space is because it's not a mature investor market. A lot of these people, it's probably their first time investing in something, right? Because unlike, if you want to buy stocks or whatever, you need to be 18 or even 21 to buy that. Plus, you need to do a ton of research, and it's all very complicated and convoluted. Whereas, with buying NFTs, oh, create MetaMask wallet, oh, put in like $300, and there goes my money, right? But yeah, I think it's just because the investors in this industry, there are some very intelligent and well knowledgeable people who are investing in this space and who have been in the crypto space for years and years. But I think because of what's, the exposure that NFTs has been getting in the media, on TikTok, we've attracted a lot of very young investors who don't have the investment experience. and have very high expectations because of what the media has portrayed NFTs to be,
Well
which
said.
is a get rich quick, become a millionaire, buy this NFT, buy that NFT, look at Bored Ape, yada, yada, yada. That's kind of what's been relayed to all the new people coming into the NFT space, which is why there's so much pressure on founders, is because they are expecting your project to go from like what 0.01 ETH to 10 to 30 ETH in a month's time, and for whatever has been promised to be done in 3 months. But that's not how projects work. Not in the Web2 space. Things take time to be developed. And even, I would probably relate NFTs and OpenSea to Kickstarter. I don't know if you've
Mm,
heard of that,
absolutely.
where you raise funds to build out the vision that you have had, to, release your project. And yeah, it takes time, and I think people are just very impatient. And then, because they're hiding behind anonymous identities, you start getting a lot of attacks as
Yeah.
a project founder.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess the only kind of advice that I have to give to, investors and the community and people in the NFT space is, at the end of the day, we're all humans. There is a person with feelings behind the
Yeah.
computer. Yeah. And that, things take time. Um, I would probably recommend, to read up on how kind of investments and startups work, because what TikTok has shown you, what YouTube has shown you, it's all super unrealistic. And, your 400x's, they're like a 1 in 100 chance for projects, right? So don't expect them to just blast off to the moon. And yeah, just, if you believe in the project, have some faith and have some conviction, and be patient about it. Obviously, there's a fine line between being patient and, if a project isn't really communicating or doing
Of
anything.
course. Of course.
But yeah, just be kind, I guess, is all I can say.
I like that.
Because
No, it's
yeah,
it's you know what? So, sometimes the simplest answer is the best, and be kind is definitely something that the world needs a little bit, no matter what's going on, but especially with the global macro, what's happening at the moment with inflation, with war, with everything. It's absolutely be kind because you
yeah.
never know. I guess a final big or deeper question, and then we'll jump into some rapid fire and start to wrap up. I know you've got some packing to do before you fly
Yes.
in a few hours. So again, this does relate to founders because we most of our listeners are founders and investors, and so there are lots of projects right now with beautiful people who are in the senior team or as the founders who
Mm-hmm.
have had really terrible external things happen, whether it was they were invested in a project or in partnership with a project that got rugged, or their portfolio got destroyed, and their balance sheet and treasury got destroyed during this bear market. um and they're it's unlikely for some of them to be able to keep going and sustain feeding their families. What would you say to someone who really does actually need to pack it up and try again, whether it's another project or work with a project for a time being for something a little bit more stable, and that's what they
Mm-hmm.
need and would do in any other circumstance, but they're worried that their entire reputation in the Web3 space is going to be destroyed if they soft rug or try to let's call it gracefully exit a
Mm-hmm.
project. What would you say to them?
I mean, what I would say to them is, as long as you've tried your hardest and you know that you've tried your hardest to make this work, I I would say just go for it. It's not your fault that the market completely collapsed, and if if your treasury was held in ETH or not in a stable coin, or if it was held in a stable coin, but then held in one of the exchanges that completely crashed and burned. It's as long as you as a project founder have tried to deliver it to your very best for your community, and external things have just not made it work, don't listen to the noise. You have to take care of yourself as a priority. When people invest into your project, they know the risks. They should be doing their own research to, understand what's
Not
going
overhead
on.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you only put in what you're willing, what you're comfortable to lose, right? So it's not your responsibility as a project founder to make them 10x or to make them 20x. Your project is your responsibility is to see the project through and make sure you try to achieve the deliverables that you did promise to your holders. And if things externally don't work out your way, and the market crashes, I mean, you have your own family, you have your own life that you need to take care of first. And you also, most importantly, have your own mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the biggest things, is to take care of your mental health. And yeah, that's all I can probably
Absolutely.
say. Mm.
Absolutely. And we need these people who are willing to fail. And I think we as a community, a larger Web3 community, have got to be willing to see people fail, and
Mm-hmm.
encourage failure, because failures, I've failed multiple times in my journey, both in and Web3 and Web2 before and my whole life, and a lot of the failures have led to subsequent tremendous success. And if it wasn't for
Mm-hmm.
the failure, it wouldn't have happened. So, these
Yeah.
people are often very talented, very, very well-meaning and compassionate people.
Mm.
And I think it's on us to make sure that, as long as they're transparent, they communicate what's going
Yes.
on, and as long as I think that they give an opportunity for the community, if they want to hand the project to the community, um, give the creator royalties back to the community, and take a step back. I think that's a way to gracefully exit if it's no longer feasible for you, right? So
Yes.
um, this has been a wonderful conversation so far. Thank you so much for your time.
No.
I have two or three rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up, and we'll see you in Bali
Okay.
very soon. So
Yes.
I ask this question to everybody. Number one is, if you were to be able to wave a magic wand and receive something, or be introduced to someone, or just change one little thing, and it doesn't have to be like world peace, or or save nature or save the world. It can be anything. It can be something small, someone you want to meet, something you want in your life, um, or for your community in general. What would that look like right now?
Um, Wave a magic wand, and I would want all the knowledge in the world about technology and AI, so I could be, more confident in terms of, providing for the community.
That's super cool.
Um, yeah, knowledge. Knowledge is power.
I love that. I love that. That's super cool. Um, what a great answer. And it strikes that you want it so that you can serve better. That's fantastic. Okay. I've already got like three people I need to introduce you to. One is Xiangkun, the president of RCT AI and Delicium. I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation, just to see you guys
Yeah.
riff on it.
Yeah.
He was here for NFT Bali, and he wants to support the next one. Then, of course, Cam from Non Fungible Films, and then Boomer from Life Force Games. They're building a no-code game builder software,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can build a game for like 10% of the price of what it usually is. So it solves a lot of pain points. But that's
Awesome.
another conversation. So the second last question is, as a whole, have you got a last piece of advice? We've got a lot of great quotes from you today. Just be kind and all these kinds of things. But if you were to be put on a megaphone, and millions or billions of people could hear you today, what would you say to them?
I would tell them that life works in cycles. We're just in a bad cycle at the moment, and as long as we keep supporting each other, keep checking up on each other. We'll all make through it, and we'll all be in the next bull run together.
I love it. I love it. Just survive and take care of each other, and we'll make it through
Yeah.
the cycle. That's super cool. Last one. Are there any books? What is the most gifted book that you've given to someone, or perhaps just a book that's really resonated with you in recent years?
Atomic Habits is probably a
James
really
Clear.
great book. Yep.
Nice.
I have been a very bad procrastinator in life, and after reading that book, it's really put on a great perspective on how to get shit done and the power of consistency.
That's awesome. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to being
Thank
able to
you.
release this. Looking forward to seeing you in person, meeting the rest
Yes.
of the Nano team, having some fun and building the future together. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thank you so much for having me, and can't wait to see you again once I land in Bali and settle down.
Fantastic. Stay blessed. Be a blessing.
Okay.
We'll speak soon.
Bye.
Ciao. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Signal. You'll find links to everything mentioned in today's conversation, as well as ways you can get in touch in the show notes below. We're always curating our next guest, growing tomorrow's leaders, and putting people in touch whenever synergy and alignment is clear. Until next time, stay blessed and be a blessing.